Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, depending on where you are in the part of the world. And welcome to another Test Automation Meetup sponsored by Zappeltech. Today, let's start by saying who I am. I am Larry Goddard. For who don't know me, I am the creator of a nice little test automation framework called klassi-js. It's one of those things that build over the time to help all the QAs out there who are new to the game and want to try automation. You could pull the framework down. It's KLASSI-JS, and it's on GitHub. All right. So on to today, we have some two exciting speakers coming with us today. They're gonna talk about some very interesting things that would be very nice for you guys to listening to, and at the same time, if you have questions, just pop them into the chat, and we'll get them asked for you later. For all the people who may ask questions and for whatever reason we didn't get them answered in time, we would keep them, and we would follow them off to the speakers, and the speaker would at some point respond to your query. And that being said, I say again, welcome to everybody, and I hope that these sessions would be. Now, we have two speakers lined up for you today. We have one, Paul Grossman, and he is going to talk to us about tips and tricks of low code testing tools. And there's a lot of things. That's the new thing in the market, as we would say. A lot of people is dwelling into it and dabbling into it and getting there. So Paul, being our expert on it, is the guy who would introduce you to all the niceties of them all. And then we also have today. We also have Robin Goldsmith. He would be our next speaker for today, and he would lead off a discussion on what we would say is learn the most important part of test automation. And I would just leave that there for a second because I wouldn't spoil the surprise for you. But Robin is a guy, he would you knock your socks off with saying something with talking things like that. And it's really good to see where we are in the testing space, and it's also good to know that we have a lot of people out here who willing to spend time to listen to us and take things on board and learn and also input. So like I said, so the good thing is it's all about us passing the knowledge on, and you, our viewers, into coming at us with with questions and concerns, and even your own ideas. You can even, it don't have to be an actual question. It could be something that you think could be said more onto, and things like that. So that's the way in which we'll take this little chat on. So I know, like I said, I know we have Paul, and just a little about a little of the man himself. He have I like to say Paul is one of them guys. As he put it, he's the person who bringing low maintenance, high scalable magic object model approach to JavaScript. JavaScript WebDriver IO into 2021 and beyond, and we already on the beyond part of it. And Paul has been going from strength to strength in he talks, he hosts like I am doing at the moment, and and it's about learning from what he says and picking up and following on the things. So I think we have I think Paul. I have Paul here with me, and I think Paul is ready. But before we push on to Paul, like I said, let me just jump back a little bit into myself. I also, besides doing the hosting, I also talk as well. So my little background on me for this is I am the test automation architect for Oxford University Press, and out there I am responsible for everything as the job title say, I'm the architect. So I'm responsible for not just looking at what we have, but looking at what's coming in the future and trying to see how best we can integrate the future with the present. And in doing so, I also, let's say, do log on and see what's out there, what is coming, run POCs on them to get them all tied up in it, and also to get the younger guys and them who now join in, coming out into the whole QA space, mentor them, listen to their ideologies, the way they have things, and then for me to try and pass on some of my knowledge onto them, and combine our heads together and see what's the best solution for any given project at hand. And so that's a little bit about about how I do it. And so it's about inspiring and empowering everybody else, to lead with and to have a voice, for want of a better word, have a voice into the whole space. That's the only way we learn. So I will. I think Paul is ready. So without further ado, let me introduce the guy to you one more time. He is Paul Grossman. There he is. We have the
Hey!
great old Paul Grossman there. He's ready to go. And from here on, he's going to talk to us about the tips and tricks of the low code testing tools. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Larry. Just to check, we can all hear and we can all see my silly hat. Yes? You can hear me?
Yeah, got you.
I got a thumbs up. All right, cool. This is my test automation thinking hat. I saw it a couple of weeks ago over at a steampunk convention, and I said, you know what? I got to have that so I can do some really good professional level automation demos in front of a bunch of people online. But normally, I'm actually known as Paul Grossman. There we go.
You need to get me one of those, Paul.
I could tell I was getting you to crack up while we were in the backstage.
Yeah, you can get me one of those. You definitely need to get me one of those. I need one.
Absolutely. We'll work that out. All right, so I'm going to go and share my screen. We'll get started over here because we do have a lot of demos and cool stuff to show. I believe I'm going to share this screen. Next thing I'm going to double check is so we know the mic is working, we know the camera's working, and we should be able to see my screen up here. I'm on that. So
we're good with that.
It's our screen. Awesome. And then we are going to be actually doing some live demos. I just want to make sure the live demo is up there. There's going to be some more live demos with Test Rigger. But to get started, first of all, let's go back over here. This is our tips and tricks of low-code test tools. I am the Dark Arts Wizard up on Twitter. And if you want to go and check out some of my YouTube videos, you can check me out at YouTube. Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard. Yes, I have a custom URL. Means a lot of people follow me, so they said, okay, we'll give you a custom URL. No random numbers and letters for you. All right, cool. And do want to thank Zappletech for doing this, hosting this event, and I'm happy to be here. Let's see a little bit about myself to get started. I've been doing test automation for about 20 years. So I've changed my programming language 3 or 4 times. Started off with a tool called Windrunner way back in the day. I still have it with me right there. Keep it with me, and one day I may actually install it into a VM so I can go and still play around with it and get that nostalgic thing. But after I left that, I went into UFT, working in VB script. By the way, this is C++. We actually called it C++ because it didn't have any pointers on it. Hopefully some developer out there just laughed at that joke. So I moved into VB scripts and did VB script on a whole bunch of different environments for several years. Turned out you don't need to have the same programming language that your application is developed in. If it's written in Java, your automation framework don't need to be Java. In fact, it can be VB script. That B stands for basic. That's for us older developers. That's the language we grew up on and were taught when we were coming up in high school in the 80s. But that moved on, and I went into Selenium, Java, and then most recently went into WebDriver IO, which means I changed my language again to JavaScript. I am a conference speaker. As you can tell, I'm here at this conference speaking over here. My clients have been medical device manufacturers, floral delivery company, entertainment delivery, and a survey department at Illinois University. And most recently, I'm working at Guaranteed Rate, rate.com, where we actually get mortgages where we can hook up buyers with sellers, and buyers with lenders in order to get you the best rate for your mortgage. And if you haven't guessed already, test automation is my passion. I love test automation. Talk to me about it all the time. Call me anytime. I'd love to talk about test automation. So I'm going to go move on. Enough about me. I'm going to go over here and talk a little bit about what we're going to learn in the next hour. We want automation and we want it now. That's what we're going to be doing. So what we're going to do is create a new user for Twitter, get most of the way through and show off a little bit about SMS and email on that. That seems a little complex for someone just starting and doing some automation. And we're going to show you some of the things, the tips and tricks that I learned actually from my programming skills and how they transfer over to a low-code tool like TestRigger, which is what I'm going to use for the demos. Usually when I do these presentations, I have this big puzzle piece over here that says, oh, we're going to talk about page synchronization, element clues, and dynamic locators. But what we really want to do is we just want to have an automation framework that just tell me how, I don't care how it's done. Just I want it now. I don't want to be spending a whole bunch of time up front creating a 5-layer automation framework that's really great and self-healing and all that stuff. I just want something that I can create a test and get it done quickly. So we'll talk a little bit about the magic object model, reusable modular design, how to interact with elements that may be in one element environment and not in the other. As I mentioned, SMS testing with Twilio. And then we got a bonus session and then a little bit about horizontal testing. Now, I'm going to give you a real life example. Tell me, and while you're looking at this, think how long would it take you to automate all these steps? You want to navigate to the website, click on loan officers, enter the loan officer's name into the first name field, and then wait for the page to build, and then click on the loan officer's name, click apply now, and then you have to do your validations. You want to make sure the page contains the employee name, the phone number, email, their ID, and the URL that when you click apply now on contains the ID of this particular loan officer. And capture a screen at every step, and if there's any errors, capture that. And if possible, just give me a video of the whole process. Show me the whole video as it goes back and forth. How long would it take you to write all the elements, the page objects, and to get through this fairly relatively simple process end to end? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention one more thing. You have to do it 36 more times from a CSV file that has 36 other loan officers. Well, I'm going to give you the answer to this result, and the completion time took me about an hour to build that whole thing. Not in code, in TestRigger, and in a codeless environment. And the total execution time for all 36 of these executions was 41 seconds total. Not 41 seconds for the whole one after another, 41 seconds in total. And yes, we did find a wonderful defect right there. When we typed in a person's name in our search, it said, sorry, we don't have any loan officers that meet that criteria, even though that was a valid name. If we typed in the last name, worked perfectly fine. So, yay, found a defect. And I love this story because when did this occur? Honest to God, it was yesterday. So I actually got a chance to put in one extra slide into my slide deck based on what I was doing and solving for someone just yesterday. So I love it when I can share a very recent new win with a low-code test automation. Now, to be fair, I am a SDET. I'm a software developer, software test automation engineer. I am hard to be convinced that low-code test tools are worth my time. And the reason being is because there's nothing for me to do. I don't really get to write a lot of code in this. I do sometimes get to write some XPath or CSS, but for me, I want to stay employed, so I always want to do the code. So it's kind of hard to be convinced as an SDET. But as a manual tester, I'm like, yeah, I want to learn all sorts of stuff about automation. I really do. I want to figure out how to do it. And do I have to spend 6 months to 2 years figuring out how JavaScript or Java or Python or Ruby or whatever that is actually works? that's the great thing about having a low-code test automation tool is that you can create your scripts really easy. I'm going to show you what my code looks like side by side over here. Let's say I want to go and click on a button like sign up with phone or email. If I were to do that in code, I'd have to go and create my object over here. So there's my, well, it's called the get in touch button, but it actually should be sign up with. But okay, I'll have to update that slide later. But anyway, it's a button that we're sitting there, and then we're going to go and go click on this button. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip from the developer side. I always write wrappers for my code. So it's not just I'm going to go and do an element click on this. I'm going to create my own custom click method, and then I'm going to call that from somewhere and then pass it in the element that I want. In that case, if I pass in an element and it's stale, it doesn't exist anymore, I can add a little bit more funky code in there to try and figure it out so I don't have to have a bunch of maintenance. But in this case, I'm going to show you that we want to go and check and see if this element that we pass in is clickable. And if it is, we're going to go click it. It's great. Is clickable is a great little check. I know there's lots of other things you can do. Is it visible? Is it enabled? All that stuff. If it's clickable, you've already got it's enabled and it's visible out there. If it's not clickable, it's a good chance that your element may exist, but it's on a tab, hiding behind a tab somewhere. If it's not clickable, if we can't do a click on this, if it's not clickable, we're going to click on it. We're just going to say, hey, the element wasn't clicked, and do our assert and say, hey, the test failed, and output some information like which button could not be clicked. Outputting the selector is great. Now, in Codeless, click on the sign up with the phone or email button. Let's see how that goes in a demo. We're going to do quickly. We're going to switch over here and see how that actually looks. So here are my test cases. I got a whole bunch of them. I'm going to go and start working on my Twitter phone setup over here. I'm going to go edit my test case. First thing I needed to do was I'm going to go and navigate over to Twitter. So to do up my validation, and I want to go, my instructions are to click sign up on email. So I'm going to go and, all right, fine. That's just a regular step. I'm going to go paste that in and just say, hey, click. By the way, the click doesn't have to be all capitals. We could actually make it lowercase, uppercase. You know what? It doesn't really matter. Us humans tend to make mistakes on the way our formatting is. In code, it has to be exact the way, the uppercase, lowercase actually matters. In this case, not so much. So here I'm going to do, I'm going to go and update this and restart it. And we're going to take a look live and see how this actually works out. It is going out here. Let's see, what website is it actually first going out to? Let's take a look. Oh, it's Zappeltech's website. Wonderful. Okay, we go over there, but we actually want to create an account over on Twitter. So we're going to basically re-navigate over to Twitter. And there we go. It's saying basically our step is to go and open up Twitter. And boom, we've got Twitter out there. And what's our next step we're going to do? The step says, I'm going to get rid of this. We don't need that. Click on sign up with phone or email. And there's our button. Click with sign up on phone or email. But one thing I wanted to mention is that there was some extra instruction. It says, hey, it says this may change in the future. So what if I would just say, sign up with phone? Would that work, even though it's not the entire exact wording that we've got on the button? While this is going on, I'm going to switch back over here and kind of mention that when we are creating elements, usually when you're in the page object model, you're going to probably write something that says the button text equals sign up with phone. I don't like doing that because that makes that a very brittle element, because if that text behind the scenes ever changes, then you got to go and maintain your elements. To reduce that maintenance on the coding side, you should probably write something like contains text, and we pass in the text and we're looking for sign up with. I don't have the capital S in there because it might be please sign up with, and now the capital S is lowercase s, and then I ain't going to find anything. So I try to keep this as minimal as possible as things change, and usually you pump into stuff that's changing all the time. You can figure out what's going on over there. All right, let's go take a look. Hey, my test case passed entirely. Even though it says click sign up with phone, what does it say over here? It actually found sign up with phone or email. So I'm using this low code tool. I didn't quite exactly give the right text. was kind of short. They found the right element and moved on. So cool. One thing down and low maintenance on your coding side and also low maintenance on your codeless side. All right. By the way, you can run different ways. I mentioned you don't have to say click on the button. You can say click the button. You could say click this button. In fact, you could just say click, sign up with phone or email. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to have the correct capitalization of there. However, don't let that fool you. It doesn't mean you can't do it. Yes, you can actually use the words click this exactly, and then it will say, okay, if it doesn't have a capital S, we're failing the test. Let's move on. Okay, next, we're going to do a set value and enter. We want to enter something in here. Here's the way I'm going to do a set value. I want to enter my name into my field, my name field. I've got another wrapper out here called set value. And again, it says if it's not clickable, if it's clickable, you can go and enter the value. If it's not clickable, we say, hey, we output something that says the element wasn't edible. And at this point, should we stop the test? We have a try assert that says, hey, this totally failed because the field couldn't be found. Now, me personally, when I do my automation frameworks, I let my fields go. I will say if I couldn't find it, try and fill out the rest of the field and see if you can go on and output some sort of warning. I generally don't stop on the field. I will stop on a button. If the button doesn't exist, more than likely you're not moving on to the next spot. In the codeless side, enter Paul into the name field or type Paul into the name field. That's it. That's all I need. We're done. You didn't need to learn a JavaScript in order to do that. Let me go take a look at our demo and see how this is going to work out. I'm going to go edit my test case. And it says here, click on the sign up with phone. And what was I going to do? Enter. I'm going to go set of value. So I need to set a value of the name in here. So I'm going to go and say, enter Paul into name. I believe we're going to do that. We'll make that a capital over there because we're entering the name in there. I don't think there's any other validations we're going to do there. So I'm going to update test this one more time. Oh, I typed one thing. It says here the number of unescaped double quote characters is odd. I forgot to put in a quotes around my name. That's an intentional error just to show you that this is a great way of debugging your scripts. It actually tells you what's going on out there and it stays up there for quite a while and then it goes away. Clears out, we're ready to go, update and retest, and we'll let that chug along as we go along. I'm going to come back over here. So basically I've said enter Paul. I could say type Paul into the name. There's a lot of different ways that I can do that. So that's kind of cool. So I'm going to come back over here. We'll take a peek at this and see what's going on. Oh, you know what I mentioned earlier is that I'd like to see a video of all this. I mean, I'm getting screen captures as I go along. That's cool. Hey, sign up with phone. I actually had it had an error, so I'm going to go back to our original one over there. We'll say sign up with phone or email. We'll do that. And by the way, that is a risk that happens with all automation frameworks. Is if you do shorten it down, there is a chance that you're not going to be able to find what you're looking for. I'm going to go take a look at the settings because I was talking about, hey, I'm doing screen captures, but what about video capture? Under Test Rigger, I actually do have integrations over here, and I can say record video of the test cases as they're going along. So maybe I can catch what was going on out there. You can also do speed optimization. So it's probably my problem is my timeout. I want to make this super fast, and I changed it to 3 seconds. I'm going to change it to 10 seconds over here for the timeout maximum, and we'll hit apply and save on that, and make sure that my integrations are, my recording my video is okay. So I'm going to go back over to my test case and take a look at it. Oh, we got a pass. Well, that's a great thing. Let's go take a look at what we had over there. We're going to go take a look and say, enter Paul into the name. That's what I wanted to do. Enter Paul into name, and guess what? It found the name field and it typed in my name, Paul. Cool. We're doing great here. And the next thing is we want to put in my phone number, date of birth. We actually want to use an email in order to validate this. But we're going to take a step back real quick, just one moment here. Because the next thing we want to do is, now that we've done an enter and did it pretty easily, the next thing is, well, we've all been told we need to use XPath and CSS in order to create our elements. Can a low-code test automation tool do this? Actually, TestRigger does do it. You just have to say enter Paul into the path, XPath, and give it the locator name as a locator, or do it as a CSS. And I use this as my last, if there's an element that just is almost impossible to find and Selectors Hub gives you a locator, then go for it. Use an XPath or a CSS locator. It doesn't stop you from getting in there. I do want to mention for one moment, I will come back to what I'm going to mention here. We're going to go back over to our test case out here, and we are going to go and enter in that name. Let's take a look at what we had over here. In my demo, I say I want to, use XPath instead and enter Robin. All right, fine. I will do that. I'm going to go and copy this name over here and pop that in. Okay. And then the next one says use a CSS selector and enter in Larry's name. All right, fine. We will do that. So I'm going to go for this first one. I'm going to go and copy in this locator into XPath. We'll do that. And instead of letting the system do it, I'm going to say this is the exact locator that I want. And instead of Paul, I want to put in Robin. Over here, we'll put in Robin. And over here, we want to do pretty much the same thing. We will copy this. We'll put this into here. But this time, we're going to use this CSS locator, and we're going to use that to identify our element. So there we go. We're going to go paste that in there. And we are going to say this is a CSS selector, I believe. And I'm going to go and validate this. I'm not sure if it's CSS. It is CSS selector. All right, cool. Fantastic. So I'm going to let that run. We'll retest that and see if we get, oh, wait, did I change Larry's name? I want to make sure that I did that. Edit my test case. Did I put Larry's name? I put Robin's first time? No, we want to put Larry in there because it's not going to be all that impressive if the name doesn't change in the screen capture, is it? All right, Larry, you got your name in the CSS. I'm going to update and retest. Now, while this chugs along, I'm going to go back over here because there was something I wanted to mention about this. You may be asked if you ever get into as an SDET, automation engineer, what is the best way to create your locators? And the internet is going to give you a really bad answer. That is, always use CSS because why? It's faster. That's the wrong answer. In fact, I use that question when I'm asking people about their experience in automation. It's my little test to see if you are a noob or if you're just intermediate or if you're a pro. Now, the noob's going to say, oh, yes, I use CSS because it's faster. Don't care. The faster speed is within milliseconds. It's not something that you could visibly tell. You would have to put in reporting that says, hey, this was found 4 milliseconds faster than an XPath over a CSS. The real reason you want to use a CSS selector is if your elements are in a shadow DOM, because you can't use XPath to find your elements in the shadow DOM. That's cool. That's a reasonable reason to do that. And I will say, okay, you're an intermediate guy who knows what you're talking about and doing over there. The other thing is there's a reason you would not want to use CSS is because over in some examples, we would have to find, we want to find something by text. And I don't have an example on this on the page, but I will go back. Let me see. I'm not sure which slide I've got it on here. But basically, you could replace in an XPath, instead of saying looking for the name property, you could say text, T-E-X-T, and parentheses, and see if it contains the word name. The problem is, as far as I know, that doesn't exist on a CSS. You cannot find an element in CSS by looking for the text that's displayed on the screen in the brackets. Not a thing. So a recommendation is use XPath unless you have to use CSS for one reason or another. You answer those two questions on interview, and you will get a you'll get probably a rating that says, "Hey, this guy really knows what he's talking about." Hopefully, the guy's interviewing, he knows what he's talking about, and it's like, "Hey, the paper says it's supposed to be faster." Let's go jump back over to our test case over here and take a look at what's going on over here. We passed. This is great, and let's go verify. I don't trust that we did that correctly. Okay, let's see. So one of the things that this does is that it actually combines steps together. So it did enter my name, Paul, into the field. Then it replaced it with Robin, and then it entered Larry. How do I know that? Because Larry's name is sitting there. It's the last thing that we executed, and nothing failed. It says everything is looking all good and cool. So we're all happy and cool with that. All right, let's move on to our next part of our demo. We've got addressed all the XPath and CSS, so we can do what we do in coding. We can do it in there. Here's our next bonus thing over here. I didn't mention this on our description, but what if you have a button that exists in test in your dev or your staging environment or your QA environment, whatever you call it, but it hasn't been pushed to prod yet? So your script is going to say, I want to create this bogus button. The bogus button doesn't exist, and I want to go click on the bogus button. But if you click on it and it doesn't exist in production yet, your test is going to fail, right? So how do you handle that? Well, again, as I mentioned, I write wrappers, and I have a wrapper that's specific for this. It says click if exists. Instead of just doing click, it says, hey, click if exists. If this element is clickable, go click on it. Okay. If it's not clickable, just say, hey, the element wasn't clickable, but don't fail the test. We're going to comment out our try assert. This is the assertion in WebDriver IO that would stop the test dead. It basically says, yeah, it wasn't there. And in some cases, what happens in real life, we have a button called next. You fill in some field and you put in next. And I am really trying to hope. I'm going to turn this upside down so it doesn't ding. You have a button on your screen that says next in staging, but they realize, hey, once you fill in that one field, you don't need the next button. We're just moving on. So the next button may not exist on the page in production. So we say, hey, click it if it exists. Maybe it comes back. Here's the big point of that is that if it's there and it's missing, or if it comes back, you don't have to go and fix your scripts. That's the big thing in coding. Now, how do you do that in a low-code tool like TestRigger? Well, I'm going to say click bogus if it exists. There is nothing that says bogus. There's no button to click on it. And then I'm going to go and do this. And you can do the same thing. You can enter my name into bogus field if it exists. So let's go and verify that that's a real thing. I'm going to go edit my test case. And we're going to come back over here and say, there's my bogus. It says, hey, click if exists, bogus. So how would I do that? Well, the slide said there, I could just say click bogus. And by the way, I have dogs. You probably hear them in the background. That's okay. They're all excited about something. Probably another dog. All right. Click bogus. But that's going to fail the test if it's not there. I'm going to say if exists. If it, spell that right, exists. We'll do that. And I'm going to go update this. Hey, I typed the right word in there. I was wondering if it's exist or exists, if it's singular or plural. While this is chugging along, we're going to sit here and go back over and take a look at this, see if there's some other stuff we can talk about. As I said, I do click if it exists. I do wrappers for all my methods. Click, select, assert, and select from a list. You get those four. You get probably 90% of the stuff you want to do in an automation framework. However, I have versions of each one of them. Click if exists, select if exists, select is each one of them is out there that the test will continue to run even if I think that the element I'm looking for isn't there. And if it's not there and it's supposed to be, and you move on, well, the next thing is the next button you're not going to be able to play. So there's other portions of the framework that are going to catch whatever's going on your path. All right, so I have click if exists. Let's go take a look back over here. And hey, my test case has passed. and I'm going to take a look. It says here, click bogus if it exists. Doesn't fail the test. It says everything is A-OK. And basically more details. Any details on this? Yeah, we put in the names, Robin, Larry over there, on there, and everything was actually okay. But the important thing is that the bogus button did not get clicked on that, so we're cool with that. We passed entirely, so I'm happy that that is working the way it is supposed to work. All right, so click bogus if exists. Doesn't exist on the button, never existed out there, but didn't matter. If it wasn't there, we continued on, didn't fail the test. Awesome. All right, let's look at our next portion over here. Now that we've figured out how to interact with elements that may be in stage but not in production, assertions, we got to check that something's going on over here, right? Okay, so when I do this in WebDriver IO, I use a library called chai assert. And one of the reasons I like it is because, little side note, it has the ability to do what they call soft asserts. So by default, everything's a hard assert. If I assert something and it's not there, it dies and stops the test. I prefer a soft assert, which says, hey, if it's not there, report the failure, fail the test, but keep going and do the rest of the fields out there, which my ultimate goal is always to try and get my test to finish. Okay, so there's my chai assert. And what I'm doing over here is saying, hey, this element did not exist if it fails. So I'm basically doing an assert of text success should be means that if it exists, and then if it doesn't exist, we're going to put out an output there. The text success selector doesn't appear. My selector is this will not be shown publicly. That's the text I am looking for on my page out there. Obviously, I could also set up an element that says, here, I'm going to pass in any string. I generally don't write it like this, hard-coded into my element description. Actually, for the most part, I do because those elements don't change. But in some cases, we want to check different types of text, and I don't want to write 150 different types of elements. I just want to pass a string in here. It's just a side note. Doing it on a coldest side, check the page contains. This will not be shown publicly. Let's go take a look and do that quick demo over here. So I'm looking for, it says assert the page contains, this will not be shown. All right, well, I will say, check the page contains, and I misspelled page, you guys can see that. I will do that. Check the page contains, and the text that I wanted to put in here was this will not be shown publicly. Cool, let's pop that in there. And I'm going to go and update and retest and let that chug away. Now, I mentioned earlier that there is, we can do videos, and we'll take a look at the video in just 1 second once this is complete. Over here, he's chugging away, going out over here. Oh, and by the way, I don't necessarily have to change the URL. I'm just using Zapple Tech as my starting position. But what you can do is say, you know what, if I have a URL that I always want to start with, my landing page, I put that over in my test suite details so that I have this URL that say, okay, that's the one I want to go to. But you can switch URLs. You can actually set up ways to dynamically change which URL. If you're going to production and then you want to run the same test against staging, you could do it like this. Or you could have a separate project and then share your test cases over to another project that's already pointing at state production and use the exact same test cases you're using in state. It's really kind of cool. Don't have a lot of time to show that one off today. So here we are. We actually got through all of this. And what was the validation that I wanted to do over here? I want to check that the page contains this will not be shown publicly. Let me go to my screen over here. Let me open it up here. And guess what? This will not be shown publicly. Confirm your own age. Remember, I didn't have to have the entire exact string in there. But it does find that it's put that string up there, and it's all done. It's all cool. All right. So we have done our validation. By the way, some people like to use the word check. Some people like to use verify page contains. Some people will say assert page. It doesn't matter. All these three words will do exactly the same thing and verify that the page contains that information. All right, moving on. we should actually work a little bit with variable in there. So in this case, I've got a name, and I've let my variable my name equal to Paul. And then when I'm doing it as coding, I set my value and set the field. The field's going to be this name, and I'm passing in a variable my name instead of an actual hard-coded string. And of course, I do have the set value down here doing the exact same thing. It's checking to see if set value is clickable, and if it is, set the value. And if it's not, say hey, the element was not editable. As I said, when I do set value, I generally will not do a chai assert. I will just do a warning that says, hey, I couldn't find this. This thing wasn't clickable, and here's a screen capture I'll add in there as well. Obviously, I'm already doing the screen captures every single time. So in Codeless, we want to say, click sign up with my name and email, and then enter a saved value, my name, into there. All right, so let's go and set some data for this guy, some variable stuff. So the test data I'm going to use, I'm going to go over to my test data over here, and I'm going to go and add in a new text over here. By the way, text, if it happens to be a password, you can have it hidden, and it won't show you what the password is. But in this case, I do want to have it shown, so we'll have the text over here, and we will need something else on this. My variable, so the variable name is going to be, we'll call it my name. It can be spaced out if you want. We can do that. And the value we're going to put in there is we need somebody else's name out here. Let me go check and see if there's any questions that I have. By the way, you can put questions while you're watching the session. On the right-hand side, there's actually a question area that you can throw stuff over there. So I don't see anybody's name popping in there. I should have mentioned that earlier. So we're going to put in somebody else's name over here. Let's see. I like. Let's see. What's a good person? I like Woody Woodpecker or Woody Harrelson, whichever you want. We're going to put Woody in there. I'm going to add that in, and then I'm going to go back over to my test case, and we're going to change that a little bit. And we will go over here, and we're going to go edit this. That works. Hey, I typed it in there correctly, so that's cool. And we're about halfway through this presentation. Actually, more than 3/4 away, because we are going to save a few minutes for questions at the end. So you got about 15 minutes for anything that you've seen in the last half hour. Just put them up there in our question streaming over there, and ask away. And at the end, we'll play Stump the Automation Engineer and see if we can answer these questions for you, because I'm always happy to answer stuff. All right, all this stuff, and I didn't have to write any code to figure it out or support it or add it. And I do want to remember that I want to show you the video of this after we're completed. So hopefully this is going to go through, add in my name, Larry's name, Robin's name, and then finally put in, let's see, name did it actually put in over here? Does it work? It put in Woody's name. It actually pulled from the variables and stuck it in there. Oh, I don't believe that. Paul must be faking this whole thing. Let's go take a look and see. Do we have a video of this particular test case? I actually have a video up here. Play. I'm going to go click on play. It says, okay, so the video's still in progress. So I'm going to go have to, so we can see your tabs. Okay, cool. That's all right. Hopefully I'm not giving away too many things over here. But I can go and hide my tabs. Not like it's okay. We're going to show the bookmark. I will get rid of those over there. Thank you to the moderator for pointing that out. I should have hidden my tabs before. Okay. And at the tabs at the bottom, you can see the tabs at the bottom. I guess I could hide these. Well, we can hide those taskbars. Okay, at the bottom of the screen, no problem. Taskbar settings, lockbar. I want to go and do taskbar settings. While we do that, I will hide that because why not? Lock to automatically hide the test part. How about that? Does that look good? I love it when I get instructions from the back from the back of there. It's like, oh, give me more desk space. We always want more desk space. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Let's see. We're going to go back over here, and we said that we are actually able to do Woody. Um, and what was my presentation? Let me see. Where did our presentation go? I am looking for. I may have somehow stopped it, but I will hit this and hit Shift F5 and bring it back up. There we go. So we did our variables. We did variables in there. We can have encrypted variables so that you don't get to see them. That's always important to me. So let's move on to modular reusable code. What we need to do is select our birth date. And by the way, every person that we've got is going to have the same birth date. Let's go take a look back at our demo over here. Oh, I'm sorry. One of the points of this is that when working in automation, we may have the exact same things that are being executed over and over. We're going to enter the birth date. Well, every one of our test accounts may have different names, different addresses, different phone numbers, different emails, but they're always going to have the exact same birth date. What do? We create a reusable function, and we call that in every single one of our tests. Can we do that in a codeless approach? Well, let's go check it out. We'll go back over here to our demo over here, and I'm going to I would do full screen, but I want to make sure that I can switch between stuff here and I don't lose it. So I'm using up 90%, 95% of our screen over there. I'm getting really great tips from back end people, and they are fantastic. Just want to make sure that the recording, the sessions, everything you see is the best that you can get. And I appreciate all of that. And you guys are awesome. All right. So what was I talking about here? I'm going to go edit my test case, and we're going to go and see what else we're going to do here. We want to click use email instead. We'll jump around over here. We're going to go and let's see. Let me click email instead with this text. We'll do that. That was a demo for doing it with another locator. There's our demo I was mentioning. You can use text, but you can only do it in a XPath, not a CSS. There is, as far as I know, and anybody can shout out here and remind me, that is if you think CSS can actually use the text from an element to go find it, shout out and tell me I'm wrong. And it's fine. I got things good. Hey, Jen Bauer has a question over here. So I'm going to take a quick peek. Is there a particular scenario that you would have in mind that would benefit from coding your own test suite versus a low code? I'm wondering if there's complexity, threshold, or other consideration. A particular scenario that you would have in mind that would benefit from coding your own test suite versus a low code. I'm going to answer it this way. Not every tool does everything. And one of the solutions that I came from, and it took me a while to figure out how to do it in test record, it was possible, was a loop that is going through page after page after page to set up a mortgage for our company. The problem is depending on what button you've clicked at, three buttons you clicked at the top, you may not get some of those pages out there. They're missing, or you get more of them, or they're in different orders. And how do you set up a framework that means you don't have to go and retype and retest everything? In my case, I did a code where I had a loop that basically just went around and said, hey, let me see if I can do this with my fingers here. What page am I on? Let me point to the camera. I'll say, what page am I on? Am I on this page? Cool. Populate that one. Then it would loop around and say, okay, what page after I click the next button? I'm on this one? Cool. What's the next page? Oh, I'm on the fourth one. Okay, I'll populate that. And then the last loop goes, hey, am I done? Yeah, okay, great. Create a loop. That's a little bit more difficult to do in low-code test automation tools. They have a dynamic path that will keep your flow going. As I said, I always like to have low maintenance and get to the end of my test case. My two rule number ones. I don't have a rule number 2 or 3. I don't know why. But Jen, excellent question, and thank you very much for that. So I'm going to continue on, and hopefully that's gives you a good example. But there is a way to do it in TestRigger. I didn't set up for this demo. For me, I think it was faster just to set up a loop in code. All right, we're going to use click on use email instead, and I want to do a variable. I want to generate a unique email and put it in here. So I'm going to go a little bit more advanced over here just because of time. So I'm going to generate a unique email and then enter it into email field and save it as email. So we're going to do that. And the other part of this demo that I was doing is that gets us over to selecting from a list to replace an all test. So what I want to do is select June 4th, 1982, and use that in every single one of my tests. Let me just validate and save and see if I did it correctly. That looks good. All right. I'm going to go do a quick retest. This will take about a minute just to make sure that we can get at end before I show you how to make reusable modules that get reused everywhere. While that's going on, I'll talk a little bit about that because the tip over here is called reusable rules. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a new reusable rule, and let's see, I'm going to call it enter birth date. We'll call that. I'm going to spell it right here. Birth date. We'll do that. And I am also going to use it as a label over here. So we'll call it the birth date rule. And we can see that over here. So I'm setting this up while this is running on the other side. And I'm going to go and say, I'm going to say enter hello. And this is just so I can have some a step in there, just so I can save it into bogus. There we go. If exists. Cool. I'm going to go save that. And what doesn't it like? Number of unescaped. I missed the quote. I missed the quote in there. It's really great that it shows me off what's going on over here. So we're going to go and save that. And it says, hey, enter birthday was done. So I have a reusable rule called enter birthday. Let me go back to my test case, see if it passed or failed. And it did pass. What did I say last time? I said I was going to show you the video of what this looks like. So let's go knock that one out. And let's see. It actually appeared on my other. Oh no, it's over here. We're cool. So there it is, jumping over from Zappletech, going over to and playing my video back over here. It is. You can see it is a video. It is going to go click the email. It's going to go and hopefully put in all 4 names. Let's see if it does that. Paul, got that one. Now change it to Robin. Now it changed it to Larry, and it changed it to Woody. And then going to go and create a unique email and then put in the birth date, June 4th, 1982. Awesome. What a great little video. All right. I love that. That's fantastic. I'm going to go back. 1 second here. I think I am on 2 different videos. So 1 second here. There we go. So I was talking about this enter birth date. So let me go and explain what I'm talking about here. We want to reuse the same code in multiple tests. You can see I have a whole bunch of tests over here that have signed that I've got in here. This was my demo that I did. I'm going to edit my test case, and you're going to see down here I have these 3 lines of code. Select June 4th and all that stuff. I'm going to go copy that. Now, the interesting thing is that in my other test cases down here, like this backup, I have the exact same lines of code. Not better. They are. But why should I copy this? If I change the date or the month of the year from a in all my tests, I'd have to go and manually go change that. That's the biggest mistake that everyone makes with record and playback when they're doing it. I don't want to make that mistake. You'll quickly learn that you need to create methods, functions. So I'm going to go over to my reusable rules back over here. And I am going to go and take, we're going to go enter birthday. And as I said, I just put this in here just as a placeholder. And I'm going to go replace it with this. June month, day over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say save and find replace steps. And if this works, we should get, look at this. We have 1, 2, 3 of my test cases have the exact same steps in them. So I'm going to go replace those selected items. And remember, the name of this reusable rule was entered birth date. So I'm going to go back over to my test cases and let's go take a look and see if those steps are in there. Edit my test case. And what has happened? Those steps that I had, remember I had these steps over here, they're gone. They have been completely replaced with a brand new rule that I called enter birthday. Now this actually brings in one other thing that I would mention over here is someone says, okay, well, what if I want to do this like Gherkin? I want to say, instead of this, I want to say, when I enter birthday, what will that, can I do it like that? And absolutely, I'm going to go and validate and update. It says, okay, there's no action called that, so I will do it this way. So undo this. We'll close this out. I'll go back over to our reusable rules, and instead of calling it enter birth date, we could call it when I enter birth date. And now I'm going to go and save and then find an update name. I'm going to do that. It says I found it in 3 different spots. Update the name. I'm going to go back over to my test case. And then I'm going to go take a look at my test case and edit over here and see if it says, does it say? Now it says when I enter the birth date. So yes, you can actually do Gherkin-like methods in this. And this also ends up being more like a page object model because you could have your pages described as reusable rules and then have each page go through and populate data. Which brings me back to Jen's question was with my example, once I've got these rules set up as pages, I can loop through them and say, hey, which page am I at? Okay, execute this rule, execute this rule. It's kind of cool. All right, let's see. I'm going to go and retest that, and I have just a few minutes left. Again, a reminder, if there's any questions you have at the end, throw them in there. Jen's doing an awesome. Jen says, dynamic test path is a great example. Thank you. You're welcome, because I spent a lot of weeks figuring that one out. I actually leveled up in my automation engineer going, how in the world am I going to get this thing to create a mortgage? When I say this thing, I meant my own framework in WebDriver IO. That was a major thing here. So we are going through and we are going to hopefully populate our birth date out there. Let's see, what's my next? I guess I'll stick here. We'll wait for it to kind of complete. Hopefully we don't get any errors. I do want to point out something over here. You may have noticed my first item over here is pink. It's not a fail. It's not a pass. It's saying there's something going on here that we're a little concerned about. So it's detected an error, but it's not an error that I was looking for. It actually is looking behind the scenes. This may be a little bit hard to see, but it says here, uncut type error symbol iterator is not a function. So what this means is that there is an error on the backside. Example tech. The cool thing is that this is not a showstopper error. It's benign. Nobody knows that error is occurring. It's not stopping Zappletech's website from occurring, but it is something you could go into a stand-up meeting and say, hey guys, I don't know what this really means, but you might want to go take a look at it. I got the line number over here, and go check that out and see, is this something that might be an issue in the future? And maybe we can make sure that our code looks great, even though I know nothing about how they wrote it or what they did. So I think that's another cool thing. Not something I could actually get into in my automation framework. It would take me years to figure out how to do that. So we did pass. That's great. And at the very end, I should have the birth date selected over here. And check it out, June 4th, 1982. And all my test cases would do that, but we now have it as a reusable rule, basically the same as the method. What's our next thing going on is oh, bonus, you've got mail. So now I want to do a validation from Twitter, and it's going to do it through mail. Let's see how we're doing on time. Make sure we're okay. I'm going to go edit this. And by the way, that's one of the reasons I don't like to hide my bottom of my tabs, is because it has my timer on it telling me, hey, Paulie, don't go over running this because, Robin wants to talk for a little while too. And I do want to be respectful of Robin. So to do this, I'm going to go and say, hey, I'm going to go and from this point, I'm going to go and use my sign up. We're going to do a Julia Child trick over here. You always, if anybody ever watched Julia Child, The Joy of Cooking, she would take a uncooked turkey and put it in one oven and then pull a fully cooked turkey out of another. I'm about to do the same thing. I'm not going to. So basically what we're doing over here is that I am going to go and do something really cool, is that I am going to go and check that check an email. We're going to have this send an email, and then basically we created a unique email, and we're going to send that email, have the test rigger check that the email was received, and then grab the value from that email. And in that email, it says this verification code, and we're going to save it as a code, and we're going to switch back over to our first browser, and then we're going to SMS that message to a code. I'm going to hit update and restart. And we're going to go retest this, and you'll see exactly how that goes, because we are running a little short on time, and I do want to get two more things that's pretty cool out this, and how you can use Twilio. Twilio does SMS messaging and emails, and also has virtual phone numbers. I actually have my own Twilio phone number, and we use that because our manual testers are trying to create new accounts, and they have to use their own personal phone to get that code. You can use an automation, a Twilio account, to go pick up that code, and not, if you ever happen to leave the company and your own personal phone number is in some sort of automation script, you might get phone calls for the rest of eternity as long as the automation tests continue to execute. And we don't want to be going and, doing that. All right, so we are chugging along, and right now it is, I think, going over to, we'll pop over here and take a look at this. It says, we sent you a super secret code, so go take a look at your email. So here's my email from Twitter to verify that my account is a solid account. And then this is the number that it picked up, 553617, that it's sent to me. And then I am going to go over here, and it says, hey, go enter that code that I picked up. Grab the value from the text below this verification code. So it picked up this value. You can see it's doing that. And then go and switch to tab 1. So it's basically two tabs. One's the email. The other one is our Twitter tab. We switch back to the Twitter tab. It says, okay, here you go, and populate that code into the validation code. I believe I launched this before it got to the end over there. So we will do it this way. We'll look, and there it is. It populated the code into the account. And the last thing I'm doing is the validation is you'll need a password. I believe that says check the page contains the word password. That's where we're going to stop on that. You can see how we went all the way through to creating this this new account on Twitter. Yes, I probably am upsetting Elon Musk because he was wanting to see how many fake accounts there are. You could do this making a fake account. I'm not my intention trying to create a bunch of fake accounts on Twitter. It was more to demonstrate how you can use Twilio, virtual phones, SMS messaging, all that stuff without having to learn how to do any code, and use that in your own personal projects in order to get some automation done, ASAP. All right, so we have our validations. We got all that stuff. I just did want to do one other thing over here. I have another test over here, which is send me a message. I'm going to go and show you what that says. It says over here, send SMS message to saved value, the Dazerax phone. The Dazerax phone is my personal cell phone, which I do not give out to anybody. It actually sends a message. It takes a Twilio phone to send the message to this phone, if that kind of makes sense. So I am going to watch two screens at once. Hopefully this works. I don't need to have that charge. I'm going to have my phone up here. I'm going to go and validate and save, and I'm going to retest this and tell it, hey, go send me a message. And it is chugging away, and hopefully you will see a message appear on my screen like magic, and I didn't have to write any code. It's chugging away. It's in queue. It is process. It is executing, and I am stretching, and boom, we just got the message from Twilio over here saying I got a message. And what does the message say? The message says the code was 4242. If I had time, I would have asked someone to get a random number, but that is exactly what we had over here saying, hey, go send code 4242 to Paul's personal phone. That's kind of cool. I'm pretty sure you could probably see a use case for that. Let's go one last step further. And what is that? You got mail. Cool. You got an SMS message. I just did that using Twilio to send from their cloud phone to my cloud phone. That was a cool demo. And our last bonus, you got a phone call. You can automate a phone call. Check this out. Last thing, we're going to go and take a look at our test case, and it says call saved value, the Dazarox phone, from saved value from my Twilio phone, and verify it is ringing. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go and retest. All right, everybody. I'll pull my microphone a little bit closer here so that you can see this. We're chugging away. It's in queue. I love this demo. This is the best one. Now, it is actually running these test cases up in the cloud. Come on. It says it's in progress. This is really cool. It's running. Hey, I got a phone call. Check it out from my Twilio number. We'll answer that.
Greetings from Test Rigger. Please disregard this call.
Isn't that cool? Made Test Rigger call my phone. Sorry for the bump on the mic there. I got Test Rigger to call my phone from its phone. I think there's one last thing to do in this demo. I think you guys are pretty impressed. Horizontal testing. And what that means is horizontal testing means, oh, that's great, cool and all, Paul, but what will this work on other environments? And so you could go and say, yes, I want to go test it on Windows, but I don't want to test it on Windows. I want to test it on Edge, and I'm going to go add that browser. And then I also want to do it on Mac, and we'll go test it on Safari, and I'll add that browser. I will save that. I'm going to go back to our last test case. We're going to go run it for one last time. The only thing here is that it is going to, we'll retest this. And the cool thing is that once it starts executing, we're going to see 3 different environments. By the way, you can do up to 9 on this combination. And we are going to go and jump to something real in 1 second here. Since we've got this execution over link. So I'm going to jump to that, and you'll get a better view of what I mean. Here are 3 environments over here. Test Rigger under, we're doing Ubuntu. We're under Chrome. We're testing under Windows and Edge. So we are now basically taking our same test case. We add more test cases. We go vertically. Now we're going out this way and testing on different operating systems and different browsers. And I bet you the next question is, but could you do this on a mobile device? My answer to that is absolutely. So here's my test cases. They're chugging away. And by the way, they do run parallel to each other. So they're very quick to execute on that. It really depends on how many virtual machines that you buy in order to do that. If you get an open source account with Test Rigger, you get 1 virtual machine. But if you actually decide, hey, this is pretty cool, I want this, they have deals where you can get 2, 3, 4 and execute your test cases concurrently on that. This guy is chugging away. This actually tells us, hey, well, we might have an issue with working in Mac on Safari. So we would have to go back and look at that. But everything else, these guys are passing and chugging along. And I did want to go back and since we did the extension out there, what I'm going to do is get back, and we will be wrapping this up in just a minute. I am looking to see if there's any other questions. Anybody, this is your last chance because we're in the last few minutes of this. I'm going to go back to my site and let me go take a look at my time. We're actually at home, so I don't have time to do it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, that was very, very interesting and inspiring there as well. I see, but as you can see, we completely run out of time on this one. But what I would say is, for the wider audience out there, anybody who have any questions, you could still pop the questions in or email out the questions, and we have all Paul details and stuff like that. Yeah, Paul, thanks again. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, and that was the ever-loving Paul Grossman, folks. And without moving along quickly, I would like to introduce our next speaker. And like I say, he's Robin Goldsmith, and he's going to talk to us about. And there he is. Hi, Robin.
Well, hello there.
There you are.
Not to upstage Paul, but I have my hat too. We may have gotten them from the same people. Frankly, I got to tell you, a lot of Paul's talk went over my head, even though it stretches further than the camera can show. This is really warm here where I am, but I do want to thank our friends from Parasoft, where I and perhaps Paul got these wonderful hats at a conference a few years ago, and like that. Now, I am Larry. I am not sure whether I am correctly getting my screen to show. So bear with me here as I'm going to try and share it.
All right, you do that. And in the meantime, I'll just introduce out your speech. So at least you try to get your screen up, and I will let the good folks at home know that you're going to give us a little talk on, about learning the important part of test automation. But I will leave the hint for you to give it to them. So with all, it's over to you. Let's see if you can get the screen up and running.
Well, the question is my PowerPoint up? Can you see my PowerPoint? Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yep, we can see you. We running. We up and running good.
Ah, great. Now,
so I'm going to hand it all over to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, the ever-loving Robin Goldsmith.
Okay. Now, I'm not clear, Larry, on how I can also get the questions to display when I'm showing my full PowerPoint. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to screw around with technology because I have from experience that technology doesn't always work. So I'm going to be asking people in the audience to answer a few questions or provide some information in the questions box. And Larry, maybe you can monitor that and kind of reveal to me anything that anybody is saying. Okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we'll ask you questions at the end of your talk, if you can hear me.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm going to be asking people to provide us some information as we go through the talk. And I'm going to ask you to monitor the questions box because I don't see it. And I'm not going to...
Yeah, no problem at all.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, so that's fine. We can do that.
Okay, great. So why don't we get rolling here? And so what I would like those of you in the audience who are willing to share with us to write into the questions box, and then Larry will read those, what you think is the most important part of test automation, and annotate how well you are doing it from 0 for terrible through 5 for great. And then also, if you've got any issues or objectives for today, please also put them into the questions box. So what you think is the most important part of test automation, how well you're doing it, 0 through 5, and your issues and objectives for today. I'm going to continue on because I know it takes people a while to put stuff in, type stuff in. So let me share with you what I see as the objectives for today. Let's see if these are understandable, if they seem reasonable, and if they fit with your own. So first of all, we want to talk about what makes a test valuable and examine the value that automating a test provides and doesn't provide, and why developers and also testers tend to miss important test conditions, and how what I call proactive testing overcomes traditional reactive testing limitations. And so Paul's been talking about low code. I'm just going to talk more generally about low overhead ways to more thoroughly identify and test the highest risks. So Larry, have we gotten any responses?
Yes, I have one. I have one from Jen Bauer, if I pronounce that name correctly. And she's saying that she thinks testing for scenarios that matters is the most important. But at the same time, identifying the scenarios worth testing and the ones that are not worth testing, is what she is more interested in learning more about. And she put herself at about a 4.
Great. So identifying the test scenarios. Okay, very good. So let me continue on. If your experience in testing is like my experience in testing, the biggest challenge that all testers have is that we seem to get no respect. And many of you may be familiar with Rodney Dangerfield, the comedian who died a few years ago. And his catch line was, I get no respect. And that's really our challenge. And so question is, why do we get no respect, or what do we have to do to get more respect? And, there are a lot of people, certainly including a lot of vendors, but also conferences and online presentations, that declare that the solution for getting more respect is getting better at test automation. And I'm going to adjust that because I don't think that's really the solution. I think the solution, and Jen, I'm right in line with what you said, getting better at testing is the important part for getting respect. Automation is secondary. So what does make a test valuable? Once again, if you would, please put into the questions box what you feel makes a test valuable. I'm going to continue on the merry way here and suggest that what makes a test valuable is that the test gives confidence that whatever you're testing works and works properly. And so Paul has just demonstrated some elements of demonstrating that something works. Okay. Now, automating a test, well, it can facilitate repeating the test. Typically, it can execute that test faster than if you have to sit there and key stuff in. Theoretically, it reduces human errors, although Paul was very gracious in making a bunch of examples of how humans can make errors when they're automating the test. And if they don't catch those errors, the test may not catch, the automation may not catch them either. But certainly, one of the big benefits of automating is that you get lower and lower costs of repeating the execution of a test. Okay? Lower cost in terms of time and money. But there are some other considerations related to automating tests. And the first and biggest one is that test automation will not tell us what to test or how to test it well. May give us some guidance on some ways to test it. And by the way, I'm sure none of you have heard the buzzwords machine learning and artificial intelligence. Let me just caution you that machine learning and artificial intelligence may give the appearance of telling you what to test and how to test it well. But I would be very cautious about over-relying on that. Now, here's the other issue, that very often automating a test actually diverts attention, thorough testing, more thorough content attention. And basically what happens is that testing falls down because we miss important test conditions. And when I say we, I'm including both testing specialists and also developers and also users and anybody else who gets involved. And that the biggest weakness of our tests is that they miss stuff. And one of the main reasons when we're dealing with test automation is that we get into focusing on the automation itself and lose sight of the testing. And I'll tell you a little secret here, and I've been a developer for many years. Every developer that I know assumes that things work properly because they wrote it. And somehow or another, as testers, we know that that ain't always so. Now, testers are also poor at identifying test conditions, in part because what they are often doing is reacting to what's in the design or simply in the code. Okay. So if all you are doing is executing the code as it's written, what are you missing? Anything that's not in the code that ought to be there, anything that's in the code that's incorrect. Okay. And by and large, the errors are in the design. So coding, when we look at where errors come from in the overall development process, coding is actually the smallest source of errors. And focusing on coding tends to divert attention from design, system design and module design. Okay? And what we find is about 2/3 of errors in delivered code are errors that are in the design. So if you're only looking at what's been built, you have very little chance of detecting what should have been built, where the design was deficient. And there's something much more onerous that far fewer people recognize. And that is that the biggest source of errors is errors in defining or discovering business requirements. Because most system design errors are simply reflecting an inadequate, inappropriate understanding of the business requirements. So when we look at the types of tests that get automated, almost all of them are focusing on coding issues. Okay? I think Paul would agree with me that the tests that he was just creating, albeit low code, were still focused on coding errors that a developer might have made. Okay? Not on design errors and very much not on business requirements errors. So I have this technique or methodology that I call proactive testing. And one of the strengths of proactive testing in comparison to traditional reactive testing is that proactive testing is concerned with whether the requirements are right, whether the design is right, as well as whether the code is right. Okay? And requirements and design errors, those are the most important things to detect. And those are the things that the testing pyramid and traditional emphases upon low-level coding tests simply will not catch. Now, just to elaborate, I'm sure many people use the term requirements in a variety of ways. I use two types of requirements. To my thinking, there are only two types of requirements that are important. On the left, what I call real business or user or customer or stakeholder requirements. These are from the perspective of and in the language of the business, the user, the stakeholder, the customer. I just refer to them in general as business, real business requirements. They are conceptual and they exist within the business environment. And because they exist, they need to be discovered. Real business requirements on the left are business deliverable whats that when delivered or satisfied or met, provide value. And they provide value by serving business objectives, solving business needs, solving problems, taking opportunities, meeting challenges. Now, I would guess that that's very similar to what a lot of you mean by requirements, and realize that there are usually many possible ways to accomplish the real business requirements on the left. Product, system, software requirements, and I use those terms interchangeably, are a human-defined, or they rip from the view of a human-defined product, system, or software. And they're in the language of that human-defined product, system, or software. And remember that that human-defined product, system, or software represents one of these many possible ways how to presumably accomplish the presumed real business requirements on the left. And perhaps you noticed that I emphasized the word presumed, because product requirements on the right typically are based on a lot of presumptions. And presumptions have a way of being wrong. And the more that we presume, the more wrong those product requirements are likely to be. By the way, product requirements are often referred to as functional specifications. And then going along with that are non-functional requirements or specifications. Now, common conventional wisdom is that creep occurs because requirements, meaning the product requirements on the right, are not sufficiently clear or testable. And if you're in the testing world, you know that testing tends to emphasize testability as what it considers to be the big issue with requirements. In general, a requirement is not testable ordinarily because it is not clear. And so the conventional wisdom is that requirements, meaning product requirements on the right, creep because they are not sufficiently clear or testable. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that while clarity and testability are certainly important, that product requirements on the right generally creep because they fail to satisfy the real business requirements on the left. And the primary reason why the product requirements on the right fail to satisfy the real business requirements on the left is because the real business requirements on the left have not been defined adequately. The primary reason why the real business requirements on the left are not defined adequately is because the conventional wisdom is that the product requirements on the right are, quote unquote, the requirements. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term-based testing. A lot of people overuse that term and misunderstand it. But basically, a common approach is that the testers are given something to test, and the testers start by creating test cases, executable inputs and/or conditions, and expected results. And then they analyze and prioritize the risks that those test cases address, and they run the ones with the higher risks first, earlier, more. Okay. So let's look at an example. Let's say that you've created 100 test cases. You have time to run only 10 of them. So what are you going to do? You're going to prioritize them and run the top 10. So the first question is, what value did you get from the time that you spent creating the 90 tests that you don't run? Okay. I think that's a pretty simple answer, not much. And what about all the test cases that you didn't think of at all? And in fact, how confident are you that the 100 test cases that you did identify, in fact, were testing the most important things? And in fact, are you testing real business requirements or product requirements? And if you're simply reacting to the product, which is what most testing does, you're going to miss a large portion of the design errors, which in turn are due to inadequate definition of real business requirements. So what's test automation likely to do with regard to that risk analysis? Well, even in the low code example, automating a test, but especially in more traditional test automation, automating a test typically takes anywhere from 3 to 20 times as long as running that test manually. So what do people largely automate? The first tests they think of, and then they execute until they're out of time. And where did the risk analysis go? Well, it was at best way, way, way in your subconscious as you were identifying tests that came to your mind first. Okay. And so there's a very good chance that the automating actually diverts us from meaningful risk analysis. So I suggested that proactive testing, my methodology, is an alternative that helps us get the right tests or get better tests right. So first of all, proactive testing is an iterative practice. Whatever size piece of code is being coded should be designed and responsive to adequately defined real business requirements, and they should all be relevantly tested. In other words, the requirement needs to be confirmed that it's right, the design needs to be confirmed that it's right, and then the code needs to be tested to demonstrate that it carries out the design and satisfies the real business requirement. So proactive testing has a number of special techniques that enable the discovery and specification of the system, of the project, the code, to be more complete, more accurate, clearer, and more testable. In other words, ways to catch problems in the requirements and design when they're easier and cheaper to fix than waiting for them to be coded wrong and then hope that our very expensive and time-consuming dynamic tests, whether or not automated, in fact detect those. So proactive testing has more than 21 ways to review requirements adequacy. Typical organizations use 0, 1, or 2 techniques, usually techniques that are far weaker than they realize. Similarly, we have more than 15 ways to review designs. Most folks use 1 or 2 or no techniques to review designs. And then proactive testing gives us guidance on planning and designing dynamic tests. First, by revealing requirements and design issues, and then by defining more complete tests, both technical or development tests, and also proactive user acceptance tests. And we do that early before the code is written so that we're catching and preventing errors rather than letting the errors develop and then hope we can catch them and fix them when they're much harder to test. Proactive testing is a low overhead technique. And a key concept of proactive testing is that we let testing drive development. Now, this is not a political concept. This is a knowledge concept. And that is by using proactive testing techniques that help us identify issues in the requirements and design, that enables the developers to build better stuff in the first place. And it also enables us to develop tests much quicker and easier and cheaper that help us confirm that we, in fact, have economically anticipated and averted the big consequences of design issues that ordinarily cause so much of our rework. And because we're doing this early, often before the code is written, what we're doing is giving us ways to prioritize so that we can avoid the biggest rework risks. By implementing those biggest risks initially, catching issues with them and fixing them before they become more expensive and more difficult to deal with. Proactive testing helps us become aware of many commonly overlooked conditions that both the code and the tests of the code often miss. So we're planning and designing our tests early. We're prioritizing and developing them using methods, special methods that promote reuse of test assets, not just test cases, but test designs as well. Okay. And we're detecting issues, big issues, and then medium-sized issues, and then smaller issues. And we're using approaches like reusable test designs and reusable test cases that can further increase the efficiency of executing tests. And all of this is implemented selectively based upon risk, where our guideline is that we want to write just enough to be helpful. No more, but no less. So I've talked about proactive testing. Let me give you a simple example. This is a real example that came up in a testing class that I presented a couple of years ago. And so in the class, we have the participants provide a case, and then we practice the proactive testing risk analysis with the participants in the class. So this particular case came from a participant who worked for an auto insurance company. And this person described the system as for use by independent insurance agents. And that the first thing that the system does was ascertain who the client is, the types of cars and drivers and records, and information about them and their car, and things like what kind of coverage you want, how much deductibles, basic stuff that you would expect to find in an auto insurance application. And that if the person applying for insurance, if their information passes initial scrutiny, then some additional questions are asked about liens on the vehicle. That is whether the vehicle is owned under a leasing arrangement, or if there's a mortgage or installment payments are being made on the vehicle, who else might be insured, how they want to be billed, how they want to pay. And then the system, based on that information, calculates the premium, provides it to the applicant, and the applicant on a form that the applicant can then print out, sign, and return with payment to the independent agent. So pretty straightforward. I'm sure that many of you have used an application like this. Some of you may, in fact, work on them. So if you were going to automate the testing of this, it's probably pretty straightforward. If you feel like it, please put into the questions box, how would you go about automating this? What would you automate first? While you are doing that, let me share with you what the participants in the class came up with. So the first thing was that we had the author of the case identify what I believe it was a he in this instance, what the author said would be the big risks that testing should address. And so the author said, well, if we got one car and one driver, that's the basic. If we have more cars than drivers, more drivers than cars, additional drivers, the age groups that people are in, because age groups, at least in the US, that's an important factor in setting rates, and their accident and ticket history, whether they've been caught speeding, for instance. So there's a good chance that some of these might correspond to some of the things that you've identified. But we didn't stop there. Before we left the author, we gave the author a little bit more encouragement. Said, well, come on, what else? Think a little bit more. Oh, and the author said, oh, well, yeah, we really ought to, at this point, get a copy of the motor vehicle record from the motor vehicle agency. And, we have to know what the rates are. So we got to be sure that they're there. We've got to make sure that agents can use this. And then this front end has to flow to the in-house system in the back end. Now, I think that each of these is pretty important. And what's the significance of just identifying these additional conditions in red compared to not identifying them? darn, I think you can see right off the bat that simply exercising a little bit more discipline, not much, can dramatically increase our identification of important tests. Then we opened the discussion to the other participants in the class. And the additional ideas were data validation and editing. What about, online connections and session continuity? Okay, what about capacity and performance? What about compatibility? Compatibility with hardware and software environments, and checking for viruses. So all of a sudden, what have we done? Darn, these seem not so bad. These seem a lot better, and these are better still. Okay? And we're not talking about rocket science here. We're not even talking about the complexities of writing low-code tests. Okay? We're talking about applying the human brain, which too often gets left out of development and testing. So all of a sudden, we have way more than doubled the conditions. These are big conditions, because if any of these goes wrong, it's almost certainly going to be a showstopper. And then we went further with some additional, more detailed test planning and design techniques, and had some guidelines to help prompt people's thinking. And so all of a sudden, people said, oh, yeah, what about printing the quotes in the application forms? Does that really work? Are we following underwriting rules? What about the process for getting that printed application and the payment? Okay, so what if somebody generates the form but then doesn't actually file it? Shouldn't we have some way to follow up, because that's a live prospect? There's all kinds of minimums of set of data that we need to be concerned with. The calculations need to be tested, the security and firewalls and antivirus. Okay, we sort of mentioned that earlier, but there's more to it, obviously. Okay. Oh, now, if you're familiar with people who apply for loans, which is what's typically happening here, or may be related to the applying for the insurance, the person's credit score may be a factor in how we rate them, okay? Calculate their premiums. Okay? What if they want to pay with a credit card? What if the credit card is not approved? What if the credit card approval third-party system is somehow not accessible? Okay. Does it matter if this is a new customer or an existing customer? Okay. Yeah. This system is undoubtedly affecting multiple database records. By the way, in my experience, one of the areas where testers tend to be very weak is with regard to database testing. Okay? Tends not to be their area of strength. They often don't have the skills and knowledge or access to the tools. Databases are increasingly the place where errors manifest themselves. Okay. Do we have any limit on how many requests for quotes we can handle? Should we be reporting back to anybody on the various types of quotes? How many quotes actually don't end up in purchases and how many do? What if we're getting multiple quotes for the same person? Why would that happen? Okay. Is that indicative of anything else? Okay. Should we be able to compare doing this insurance application over the web to the more traditional processes of applying by phone or mail or even in person. Getting back to the database, do we ever have to purge and conversely archive records? And what about these other systems that it has to interact with? Okay, there's a lot of downstream systems, back-end systems that it has to interact with. We better make sure that those interactions are occurring. So all of a sudden, what's the difference between identifying all of these conditions versus just the ones that came to the top of the author's consciousness? What's this have to do with automation? Well, if you know that these are all risks, now you've got a much richer environment to decide which tests to automate, which tests to run first, which tests to run later. If the automation reveals one thing or another, what else might you automate, and so forth. Without having all of these variables to consider or risks to consider, you're simply going to automate whatever came to mind. And there's a good chance you're going to miss all of these other things. How many would ordinarily be automated? Slim to none. Okay? Are those things that the developers would even think to code, let alone unit test? I think not. Okay? And even user story acceptance tests, I think would miss a very large portion of those. And by and large, if they go wrong in the delivered system, how many of them would be showstoppers? And how much redesign and rework would they necessitate? So, can you see how a low overhead approach, such as my proactive testing, to identify the biggest risks that testing can and should address, really positions you to make your automation much more effective, much more useful. And by the way, identifying these risks up front before the system is coded dramatically reduces the likelihood that those risks will occur. So let's see if we've done what we set out to do. What makes a test valuable? It gives us confidence that something works. The value that automating a test provides is ultimately it aids repetition and reduces repeated costs of repeated execution. What it doesn't provide is identifying what we must demonstrate to be confident it works. Developers and testers tend to miss important test conditions because they jump right into code and react to the code that's written, and they overlook the major source of defects, which is design, and the major source of design errors is errors of real business requirements. Proactive testing gives us a way to address all of those and to do it earlier and much more effectively so that it can not only catch more errors, it can prevent them or help prevent them. Okay. And I think you can sense that proactive testing is really a low overhead technique that helps us more thoroughly identify and test the highest risks. So this is a diagram of some of the courses and consulting that I do. Okay. And many of these are available on demand at softwareexcellenceacademy.com. Okay. If you're interested in working directly with me, be glad to work with you to present one or more of these or related courses at your site and convenience, to work with you in a consulting and advisory capacity and mentoring, working on your test identification and test process and project management. And if you want to reach me, Robin at gopromanagement.com. I'll tell you right off the bat that my website hasn't been updated for years. That may change in the near future. I'm hoping that it does. If you're interested in requirements, I have a book called Discovering Real Business Requirements for Software Project Success, and a book that's been in the works for a while called Cut Creep. And it's about Agile, writing right Agile user stories and their acceptance tests. So, Larry, do we have any questions here?
Yeah, sure. Going back a little bit to where you was talking about risk of to the systems, and one of the questions was, seeing that everything that you're talking about, it was all what we call the happy path. What is the process in place for when the system it failed gracefully as opposed to it crashing?
Okay. So I think that there were at least 2 points in there that I want to respond to. The first one is that proactive testing absolutely is concerned not just with the happy path, but with the alternatives and exceptions. And that when we proactively test all of those various conditions, it's not just the happy path, it's what can go wrong, what else needs to happen, what can go wrong, what's related to it, and so forth. Now, the second thing that you mentioned was soft land versus a crash. The fact is that how it responds to problems should be part of the system's design. It seldom is. And too many people rely on the system blowing up to give them an indication that there's an error. And because of that, they often miss all kinds of other defects simply because they didn't cause the system to blow up. Proactive testing says, first of all, if you want soft landings, you need to design the system to land softly, and you need to test that that design, in fact, works as intended. And that crashing versus soft landing is not something that you should rely on chance for. So I hope that gets to the question. If not, please expand or clarify.
I think that answers it well. I think that was the only question that coming in from the thing. But I have a question. I mean, I listened to it and you went through it, and you made an interesting point about databases, and not much people look into or take the care where that is concerned. You want to elaborate a little more on that whole database, people not caring, because we know it happens.
Okay, so I wasn't sure whether you had a question there.
Yeah, okay, let me go back. I'm not sure if you hear me properly, but the question is, when I was talking about all the systems and a lot of things take place in the databases, we find of late we don't have much testing around databases, and just we don't have much of it. We have they build a database and they work, they run a few queries, and it's fine. I mean, you know, how could we, delve more into the database side of it?
So I agree completely that in my experience, there are several areas where testers tend to be especially weak. One of them is with regard to testing databases. And I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, an awful lot of the system's functionality is implemented in the database with regard to how the database records are structured and relate to each other and so forth. And I have found very few testers who even attempt to test database content and structure. And those who do very seldom have the sophisticated skills and tools necessary to dig deep into the database. So most database testing I've seen is done through the GUI, and the testing that you're able to do of a database through the GUI often will not be adequate to reveal internal issues within the database. You really need to be able to get looking physically at the database and at its indexes and so forth. Let me share with you, excuse me, let me share with you an experience that I had a couple of years ago. I was asked by a company whose services you were probably familiar with. You may not know the company name, but they asked me to come in and work with their testers and give them independent evaluation of their testing process. And what I found was that this organization, this company, had a very large and very complex database. And their developers would write select statements that literally filled a page, 30, 40, 50 lines to a select statement, because there were all kinds of joins and internal if statements and so forth. And the testers had a separate, they were using SQL. The testers had a separate tool that they could use to generate SQL queries. But the SQL queries that they generated were simply based upon replicating the database logic that the developer said he or she had used in writing the code. So the independent test of the database did nothing more than confirm what the developer said they were doing. In other words, they were not doing what testing should be doing, which is providing an independent view to confirm what the developer said or to reveal differences. And they were incredibly at risk because they very likely had all kinds of logic and database errors that were simply never going to be discovered this way. So does that get to your question, Larry?
Yeah, that answers it perfectly. I have no more questions up on the board for you. So at this point, so thanks. It was very interesting and informative from your part, and I hope our wider community take away some things, take away from some things from it, from yourself, and take away something from it as well. So thank you very much for sharing out your time. And in saying that, I also want to thank Paul as well, Paul Grossman. Yeah, I want to thank him as well for his insight into this whole low code testing tools that we have out there. I know we ran out of time with him. I have a question for him that I'll ask him when I see him next time. So thank you very much. And on that note, I also want to thank Ziplatech for giving us this opportunity to talk and pass on our experiences to the people out there, and also for everyone that's looking and watching, took time out to look and watch and listen. I want to say thank you very much for the time, and hopefully if you have questions outside of where we are now, you could ask them. You all have access to our contact details, so you can reach out and ask questions. And I'm sure both Paul and Robin would be too glad to help. So thanks again, and I think So thank you again for everybody, and on behalf of Zaplatech, thank you for the time. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.